first Helium Live of the new year. I'm happy to have Svi from Baxus join us today. We're going to do a big deep dive onto all things RWA and IoT on the Helium network, I think. So to set the theme, today we're celebrating 6 years of Helium. So the network kicked off in 2019 and is now powering real businesses across the globe in 2026, and Baxus being sort of chief among them. So a brief mention, Baxus uses the Helium IoT network. They talked about this on stage at Solana Breakpoint. Carrie Keller, Baxus' amazing CTO, gave a really great talk on that. And so they use the IoT network to track and authenticate premium spirits that are traded peer-to-peer on Baxus.co. So let's just jump straight into it. Well, maybe Svi, you want to give a quick intro before I steal the thunder about how we met each other?
Sure, yeah. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Baxus, and we tokenize wine and spirits. I think that's the easiest way to put it.
Boy, do you. Yeah, I've got a couple myself. And I'll just be silly right off the bat. I don't know if you're noticing what's wrong with my hat here, but I got a little surprise hiding under there.
Oh.
So this cues me up to talk about how we met each other. So, gosh, I forget the year, but we were in New York. You were working out of Solana Space in New York City. And I think it was Scott Siegel bumped into you guys, got a little rundown of what you were doing. And I think Carrie just directly asked, like, do you know anyone that's doing temperature tracking? And that kicked off an entire conversation. We've been chatting ever since. How do you remember that conversation? Because I was on a whole other side of it. What were you guys building at the time?
Okay, so we were still building exactly what we're building now. Baxus, tokenizing wine and spirits. At that time, we were really just focused on bottles. So people would send bottles to our vault, we scan them, authenticate them, and then make them available for trading. But what we were looking to build at the time was some sort of physical, what we were calling proof of presence or like proof of reserve. Like, how do you know that these bottles are in our vault and are being properly stored? And, wine obviously has temperature conditions. So it was actually the day that Helium was migrating to Solana, and your team was in New York at the Solana offices at Empire DAO. And Solana messaged us and asked if we would throw a happy hour, like if we would just provide alcohol for like a happy hour. And we're like, yeah, sure. Like, we're the alcohol guys in Solana, like, of course. And that was basically is like, I was down there and I bumped into Scott and I'm like, so what is it that Helium does? Like, what do you guys do? And he was telling me about it. And I mentioned like, oh, well, we had this, dream of one day being able to track like our temperature on chain with everything. And he goes, you got to go talk to Joey. So I ran upstairs and I grabbed Carrie and I brought her back down. And then you two were sitting there and you pulled up a dashboard you had, I think, to like some sensor you had set up in like in a forest somewhere, like, and it was showing like, I think at least temperature, maybe rainfall data or something. It was like a couple of different things. And we're like, this is what we need. This is exactly it. So that like Carrie basically disappeared then for a couple of days and came back as like, I now understand IoT. And we immediately went in through some probes into our vaults, like specifically starting on like the temperature and humidity and like water detection side, just for us, just for like, testing and stuff. And to be able to like, prove that the bottles that are in the vaults are being stored properly.
Yep. Yeah, that sensor that I had was a temperature humidity sensor, and I think it ran for 2.5, 3 years. It was literally screwed to the side of a tree. And at one point, the tree had grown so much that it popped it off the side of the tree. And the battery's dead on it. I need to go replace it now. But that's a bit of a picture, right, of what these IoT things do. And I think the really cool part in that case is this was my buddy's land. It was super off grid, but it was connecting to some Helium hotspots that were, I think, about 2 miles away through the forest and everything. So I think that a little bit of a parallel to some of the environments that you're working with, which is, these are commercial rick houses. They're stuffed to the brim with liquid, right? Barrels and bottles and everything. So a relatively challenging environment. If you were to try to set up like a Wi-Fi access point or something, you're going to hit the walls. But you're able to go in, you set up, I think you were setting up at the time, you were working with like a gas station nearby or something because they had internet. I can't remember some of those deployments. You had to get really scrappy about it.
Yeah. Well, our first ones were just in the vault itself, and these are like subterranean, super thick walls reinforced. So like it was almost impossible to get signal and anything down there. So we were like trying to figure out how we could transmit data. And then once you were telling us about this, we're like, wait a second, these brick houses in the middle of absolutely nowhere, like, Kentucky or Scotland or whatever, where there's no reception or no, these could work there too. And to your point, the way in which the IoT network works means that even the water, which a lot of people have tried to crack this, they've tried to use like Wi-Fi or different types of signals, but they don't actually work because of like all of the things that get in the way. But the IoT running things on Helium actually means that we can transmit signal.
Yeah, super cool. Um, okay. Sorry, you know how easy it is to nerd snipe me, just like Carrie. Like we're gonna go into the rabbit hole of IoT. I'm sure we're gonna touch on this a bunch through the call, but I'm gonna try and keep us on a little bit of an RWA track here. So, we've talked with a couple of people on this show about RWA, real world assets, and sort of the tokenization of these things on chain and what that means for folks. I think Baxus has sort of a unique spin on this, separate from what we've seen in other folks in the space. Maybe you want to give us just a really quick primer of your perspective on the RWA space, and then maybe some like targeted, like what makes Baxus different here.
Sure. Yeah. So I think the term RWA, when we first started using it, basically only referred to this digital twin to physical things. It wasn't as much like it was, maybe you would say like maybe let's say deeds to houses would be considered RWA, like real estate deeds. But it wasn't, people at the time were not tokenizing mortgages and loans and stuff of that nature. I think that's kind of where RWA has shifted to now, is often just being referred to as like non-crypto financial instruments being put on chain, which I don't love for a lot of reasons. As I mean, not that I don't love that they're doing it. I think that's great, but I don't love that as like the definition for RWA, because I always say, like, first of all, those aren't tangible. Like, you can't touch those either. So, like, what makes them real world is like the fact that they're done by financial institutions not on chain. Like,
Real
if I
world
issue
equities.
debt, yeah, if I issue debt
Yeah.
on chain versus debt in a private market, and then I put it on chain, like, why is one more real world than the other versus like a bottle or a Pokemon card or something that I can touch and feel? Like, that's as real world as it gets to me.
Right.
Um, so yeah, so RWA has kind of become this all-encompassing term. There's been a couple of other terms that are used now, like digital collectibles or digital twins or things like that for what we do. But at the end of the day, I'm like, again, this, whether I think now people more and more are recognizing, like you've seen markets running up on Pokemon and One Piece and like all these trading cards, and you're having certain areas within like the wine and spirit space also, like it really comes down to, can you turn something that is real world, let's say even as a collectible,
Mhm.
can you turn it into an asset? And that's kind of the benefit that I see that the chain provides, is not just the fact that, like, because these things have been real world collectibles for forever, but can you turn them not just into something I can collect and then sell, but can I actually use it as an asset? And by an asset, I mean, can I then borrow against it? Can I use it as collateral for DeFi? Can I use it as like a measure of like tracking the actual tangible worth? Is it liquid? So I think that's kind of like our biggest goal with Baxis in terms of what we're doing, is taking things that have historically always been assets, whiskey, both in the barrel and in the bottle, wine, etc., but actually turning them into financializing them in a way that they can actually become much more trackable, tradable, and liquid financial assets.
Yeah. I think one of the things that I love the most about it, we've seen this NFT arc happen, right? And I think a lot of people got burned or feel burned out on this sort of big wave of NFTs, because ultimately at the end of the day, somebody's sort of stuck with the hot potato. But in my case, my hot potato is like pretty awesome. I think everyone who's interacted with the Baxis platform feels like they've come out ahead. whether they've redeemed something or bought something and somebody else wanted it, so they bought it from them. I've done both sides of that party, right? I've bought mints of things that you have gone and vaulted into the Baxus platform and it's held physically there, and I've redeemed those. And your customer support guy was awesome because I wasn't home when the delivery came, and of course it's alcohol, so UPS wouldn't leave it, right? It went back, I got it back. It was seamless. You guys are awesome on that front. But then I've also had these and people have bought them, and so make a soul or something because somebody wanted it more than I did. So I have a lot of fun with it.
Yeah, that is like the good part of, like, I mean, the part that's why we tokenized it from the beginning. It was like this idea of trading. When we got started, Carrie and I started building this in 2021. Um, there was no, and we started building in 2021 on Solana. So forget the fact that there was no infrastructure for NFTs in general. There was there was less than zero infrastructure on Solana for these types of NFTs, in the sense of, great,
For
we
sure.
wanted to mint something. Okay, fine, you could mint, but it's real. Okay, well, the metadata wasn't designed to like update or like have updated information or like new information come into it. There were no marketplace. USDC wasn't even live on Solana. You couldn't price these things in dollars. You had to price
All
them
right.
in Sol. So, okay, now we have to worry about the volatility of the underlying currency so that our sellers are happy with the prices that they're getting. Like, that was another issue. Like, then even with like it was, and then marketplaces, like most at the time, like you didn't even have the marketplaces fully functional where I could list my NFTs on your market. Like everything was kind of isolated to having their own private marketplaces. Long story short, like there were a lot of things that caught up with us, which was good because it gave us time to focus on like what is our value proposition, like how are we designing it, and we knew from the beginning that we don't want to, we were looking at NFTs versus this, and it's like you would see these NFT projects, like you were saying, mint 10,000 of something for one soul each, and they'd run up to five, and everyone would be like, wow, this is amazing. And then they'd crash to zero, and everyone would be stuck holding the bag. And what we discovered early on with crypto people was that they, especially at that point in particular, their mindset was so much in the I can put my money to work in the short term, where like it might go to zero overnight, but it also might 20x, that it
Mm.
was harder for them to explain to them the value of buying something that has value that it retains. Like the idea of like buying a bottle of whiskey that will either appreciate or maintain its value over the next several years didn't really fit in with what they were trying to do on chain. And that was fine. Like it gave us, like, it was a lot of early learnings. But what we did, so a big part of our focus has been making sure that Baxus's website, like, you don't know, unless like you're really crypto minded, you don't realize that the underlying assets on there are NFTs. Like you don't realize that these are non-fungible tokens, and that like
I would
it
need
just
to.
looks like you've purchased a bottle, like you bought the bottle you wanted or you bought a barrel. Like the NFT part is really useful for us being able to then again integrate it into DeFi. So now you can borrow money against your bottle, use it as more of a traditional asset. But
Mm.
what it really helped us do was that now, the vast majority of our users don't realize that they're using crypto rails every day when they're using our platform, because they're totally normies who like whiskey or like wine or just want to buy something or want to sell something, and they get listed in dollars and they get paid out in dollars and they can off ramp directly to their bank account. So like that became like one of, more, again, we're talking kind of like RWA and like real world use cases or real world applications. It's that like we've onboarded tens of thousands of people who would otherwise never touch crypto to actually leveraging crypto on the back end of like something that they're using on a daily basis.
Yeah. I want to touch on one thing that you sort of opened up with there, which was none of this infrastructure existing when you guys started. And I'm thinking back to the folks that I met at Empire DAO, and that cohort of builders, like if it is the stage at Solana Breakpoint now, right? Like you guys are you are effectively building the infrastructure and the narrative around Solana as we speak. I usually save this for the end, but I have to give a plug to you on Twitter now, and I'll do it at the end too. But your handle is Web4O, like the letter O. You have to follow Svi because these takes I constantly are getting from you on the feed, and I always love seeing you sort of interject and like improve a narrative that somebody's trying to understand. So I'll
I
remind them
appreciate
at the
that.
end, but yeah. Um,
I appreciate
so
that.
you know let's see, what was I going to go? Oh, I had my second question in there. Um, you know, you ended with this, but Baxus is reaching this wine and whiskey audience, right? And a while back, I think you guys acquired a company, and
Mhm.
I have to imagine that exposed you to a sort of a whole new audience. And I'm curious to understand a little bit more of how you've seen that narrative shift as you've gone from just like we are the Solana wine and whiskey guys to where you're at today.
Yeah, so we acquired an app called Booze App, which is now, if you have a Seeker, Booze App is like the basis. It's still called Booze App right now on iOS and Android, but Booze App is actually the basis for the Baxus app, which we debuted early on the Seeker, with one of my absolute favorite features. Again, inspired by the DePIN, everything DePIN. But for us, it's literally it's decentralized pricing infrastructure. And so the idea is people are going to liquor stores and scanning bottles and prices. So we're able to get real-time data as to like, because right now we can pull and we can scrape everything, every historical sale, everything off the internet. But if you want to use our app and we show you on the app like what the average MSRP is or what the market value is of a bottle, right? Because the idea for Baxis is we don't just want to be a place that you have when you're just looking to buy or sell something expensive. It's like we want to be your companion when you go into a liquor store. Like when you're making any type of purchase, we want to be able to help you with like, data and information. And so Booz App was really built around that, of people tracking their collections. And so there were a couple of things that I would say were pretty notable in that regard, like that we noticed over there, and the first one is that their users were they were how do I put this? Like a lot of our early users and people that we onboarded were traders, right? They bought so
Mm.
that they could sell. They bought. These guys were a lot more the drinker and collector. And so the flow of like for Baxis of what you do, like up, like, do you buy, like up until then it was always buy, redeem, all of those things. We've always had it that you can redeem your bottles because the idea is like, you want to be able to ship them and like drink them. But that was
Mhm.
interesting is that we noticed that like we could do drops, whereas before we were focusing on like super rare, limited edition, slightly higher price point drops. What we found with like the Booze App audience, or now, a core part of the Baxis audience is that well, we could actually work with a new brand or a smaller brand that has a bottle that's sub $75 and do a drop over there, and it will most likely get bought up and consumed, like, and they'll redeem them to consume them, to actually to drink them, to add them to their bar,
Mhm.
to like, not necessarily just to trade and flip them. And that became super interesting for us to understand because it fits in a lot more broadly with a lot of where I see Baxis going in the future and like where we evolve and like continue to scale to on the data component, because obviously the marketplace is core, but really a part of like where this goes is like, in my head, I want a mental map of all like, and when I wake up in Baxis is exactly where I want it to be. And I want to know what's happening with like every bottle in the world, right? I want to know if a brand drops a new release and it sells out of all these stores, where was it distributed to? Which stores got it? And
Wow.
then when it's being purchased, is it being open then? Because like everyone's like, oh, I have to try this, or is it being bought and stashed away in basements and bunkers and like sent to Baxis because people think it's going to be valuable and traded? And if everyone is opening and drinking it, because this is one of the things that originally like I always give this example, but like when you think about wine or whiskey and these things as assets, like they're naturally deflationary in that yes, we produce
Hmm.
more and more every day and every week and every month. But if I have a single barrel release and there were only 100 bottles and I released it 20 years ago for $30 a bottle
Hmm.
and 90 of them have been consumed, then there's only 10 left and they'll never be able to make any more.
Checking for numbers on my bottles here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Um,
well, the Wilderness Trail I think tells you how many there were in the whole barrel.
I think so. Yeah. Is that is
No,
it
no,
on
that's
that one?
that's
I can't
the
remember.
that's an RFID tag, but
Oh,
it
here we
should be
go.
on. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. There we go.
So right, and so over there, it's like okay, well, what happens? The Wilderness Trail it's a great, really enjoyable. Like I love it. Good drinking bottle. It's not like one of these. Oh my
Oh,
God, it's a cult favorite.
it's on the back. I was showing the wrong
Uh,
thing.
there you go.
11.
Of 144.
I should save that one. Yeah.
So there you go. So that's the point though,
Actually,
is
I've
that
already
like
opened it. So.
perfect. So there we go, one down. So
Yeah.
like that's what I want recorded, like in the app and the data, and I want to reward users for being like, I have bottle number 11 and it's open for two reasons. One, again, that's a sub $100 bottle, delicious, really good whiskey, but like let's say, I don't know, somebody tries it and decides, I don't know, let's pick some crypto whale tries it and decides this is my favorite whiskey I've ever had.
Mhm.
I want to have a bottle of this, every year for the rest of my life. Well, most of them sold out. Like most of them are gone already or like have been redeemed. A couple are left in the vault. So this person now has to hunt down and like doesn't know how many are left. And like, so if in 20 years from now somebody wants one and it's like, great, well, there were only 144 bottles. I want to get to the point where people are incentivized to record that bottle number 11 was opened and consumed, like on the app, because then we know, great, well, we can tell you, okay, bottle 11, 12, 13, like all these bottles were open. So there's only a maximum of 19 left. And that will end up having an impact on the underlying price. It's like what you see with PSA with Pokemon cards, like they have the
Mhm.
population number. So they can tell you, they don't tell you how many of these cards were printed, but they tell you how many PSA 10s there were. Like, because they can tell you how many
Mm.
passed through their hands that they graded a 10 or a 9 or an 8. So that becomes super valuable to collectors, knowing how scarce of a resource this is.
Mm.
So that's something that again it really applies to wine and spirits, and it's a big part of what we're hoping to continue to like see and create more ways within the app and the infrastructure. And the second thing that it helps do is it helps prevent fraud, because again, right now there's no incentive to go and refill that bottle of Wilderness Trail, right? Like it's yes, it's a
Right,
Baxus
forget about
special
that.
barrel pick, but it's
Yep.
not. But there are bottles that were numbered bottles or whatever it is that like there are incentives to do it because the bottle sells for thousands and thousands of dollars. And like when you bought it, it may have been a $50 bottle. And so if you
Mm.
get to the point where you also have photographic and like evidence from people that like bottle 327 was opened and opened, then if we ever see a bottle 327 coming across the vault, et cetera, sealed, we know that it's been resealed, that it's been fraudulently refilled. Like there's a way in which you're able, and that data is going to become even more important now with AI. Um, because again, you're going to start seeing people being able to fake photos of bottles that they'll post. Like the gray market right now, the way that
Mhm.
it normally works is people will go onto these like private Facebook groups or WhatsApps and they post a photo of a bottle and somebody pays them and then they ship the bottle. And it's always like the person pays before they ship.
Mm.
Now, there have been issues where people don't ship, they don't this, like they try and use like some sort of social sorting function by the idea of like, oh, well, you're using your Facebook profile, so you wouldn't cheat anyone. Yeah, you've got guys who run away with hundreds of thousands of dollars running scams like this.
Hmm.
Now with AI, like you could start posting bottles for sale that you don't have, like you don't even exist or whatever, and like that's where again, like it gets very, very crazy and concerning. And like again, why like the physical custody element and the authenticity and the verification becomes more important.
Cool. I want to dive in actually a little bit more on this traceability. I'm going to switch hats because we're going to go back into the Helium IoT. So typically on this call, most of our topics have surrounded the build out of the mobile network. And I think just for some table stakes here, Helium is a protocol for wireless networks, right? So Helium operates this mobile network. There we go, right? Um, my phone's probably connected to it too. Um, I'm using it as the camera, so I can't see. Uh, the that's awesome, right? We've got this mobile network out there. AT&T uses it. Helium Mobile is the service that you can sign up for. It's in every Seeker that you might have bought or still in the box or whomever, whatever you're doing there. But then there's the IoT network, and this is where Helium started. This is how we met. This is the temperature and humidity stuff that you guys were playing around with in the early days. Where are you guys at today? Like, what mechanisms are you tracing? What sort of sensors are you deploying? What are you developing? Like, what's the specific? I think there's some fun stuff in there.
Yeah, so okay, so we have an entirely new product line that we've tested already. It's been in like testing and dev for about a year, like in a beta program with two very big distilleries. We're calling it Athena, which I know is confusing for crypto people because they're like it's one of 15 Athenas. For us, though, it's Athena. We're keeping it within the Greek and Roman god, pantheon, so to speak, over here at Baxus. Much more so than the crypto Athena. But our distilleries know what it is. Um, and it started off as, again, this idea of tracking for a couple of functions. One of them is tracking individual barrels for the sake of tokenization. Because if brands, again, want to access or distilleries want to access this ability to trade and to collateralize. So for bottles, those bottles come into the Bax's vault. And so we can physically prove their presence, right? That they are where they're supposed to be. But if we want to do this with barrels that by law have to be held in like, distillery rickhouses, that's a whole different animal. And so we were like, okay, how do we find small enough sensors and things that we can use to tag them? So we actually, we spoke with the Helium team. You guys connected us with some teams that were working on some types of stickers and devices. And Carrie has worked really, really closely with this company now because it's actually the thing that's, and I'll talk about in a second, is currently like under, I think it's going for like FCC clearance for like communications and stuff. Like, and then once it's approved, we have some major distilleries. So you're going to see like really big announcements coming out of Baxus on like early this year on like what's going on. But basically, Carrie has worked with the team now and directly with distilleries to figure out like what are the most important things for them to track, because it's not just, okay, great, we can tokenize, we can sell, but like they actually really want and need environmental data that comes out of the rickhouses. Because, so to give people some context, so a rickhouse might be 6 stories tall, right? 6 stories high.
Oh wow,
The
it's bigger than I thought.
floor, yeah, and the ground level in the summer, right, could be 60, 65 degrees cool, 70, right? The top floor might be 108 degrees, like at the top floor of this rickhouse. Like there are 40 plus point like temperature swings between the bottom and the top of these rickhouses. And what that means is, and this, remember, rickhouse is also deep. So like the barrels at the very, very outside of that versus the barrels that are really, really on the inside of like of these racks, because you've got them 10 deep, like in a rick, like, and then 6 stories high. The maturation of that whiskey is happening at a totally different pace, because the way that whiskey really interacts with the barrel is like, you actually don't want temperature controlled rickhouses. You want them to be exposed to the elements, because when it gets hot, the wood expands, and so the whiskey pours out, like becomes porous, right? The actual wood so the whiskey interacts, and then when it becomes cold and it contracts, it all tightens up, and so the whiskey is constantly going in and out from the wood itself in the barrel, and that's what gives it color. Color, a lot of the flavor that comes from the actual interaction with the wood. So temperatures become like a really, really, really big component in that, and like elemental exposure. And so the angel share, which is the amount of whiskey that you lose to evaporation, the amount of alcohol you lose to evaporation, is totally different on the top floor of a rickhouse and on the bottom floor. And up until now, there's been very, very limited or few ways for it to be tracked. Distilleries have kind of, I always like whiskey and wine is the same, but this in particular matters more to whiskey. Wine, the temperature data and humidity data matters a lot once it's in the bottle. For whiskey, it matters a lot actually more when it's in the barrel. And so what these stickers now do is we're able to now GPS locate, so where within the rickhouse it is, floor, rick, etc. It's able to measure temperature and humidity, which are of course like tremendously important for these things, because what you end up having now is distilleries can do warehouse management, which means that they now know where all their barrels are, because the way that they do that now is a couple of times a year, some guys go in with a bullhorn and a clipboard, and they read out numbers, like literally manually going like barrel 123 is in slot 1A, barrel 127 is in slot 1B. Like it's crazy how they do this. And on top of it, it means that if you realize, like if you start pulling barrels and samples from a certain spot in the rickhouse, they call them like the honey barrels, right? Like you start pulling your best barrels and you're like, wow, this is the best tasting whiskey. You can realize that like environmental factors that are impacting that, like it's because this place has had these temperature and humidity conditions at this exact floor, and you can then rotate your barrels. So the stuff that's at the top floor can spend 6 months on the top floor and then rotate to the bottom floor. You can start to like move your casks and your barrels between different locations. So that's why it's really important to them. In addition, it measures now, because again, Carrie's worked on, so there's airflow. There's a sensor for airflow, because that's something that is being tested as well. And it's a hypothesis as to the nature of the whiskey maturation in terms of like how much airflow is basically pulling exactly and pulling out the alcohol vapors. There's alcohol vapor, so actual how much alcohol is in the air, like ethanol vapor sensors. That is important for a couple of things, but one of them is we're working now to build an inference model on top of it to see if we can calculate the angel share based on the amount of ethanol that's in the air. So the amount of alcohol that's being released, and seeing if that can actually be used to calculate and provide an accurate reading without having to go and pull samples out of the barrels. so it's barometric pressure, temperature, humidity, ethanol, airflow. Um, I think those are it for at this exact moment. But again, really
Yeah,
what's so cool about this and what we love and something that our partners are loving and a lot of the stories we're talking to is because we're built on using these IoT devices and built on top of Helium, anything that they ask us for, we can figure out if there's a sensor that can measure it and then hook it up to the system as well. So like when they
yeah,
were originally asking for airflow, like our original sensors were designed for temperature and humidity. Like we didn't have airflow, but then we looked it up and we're like, okay, but they sell airflow sensors like that we can hook up to LoRa and hook up to Helium. So it just became a question of
yeah,
finding the hardware and that's what's so cool about it. Now again, it's distilleries. There's a lot of like other types of parameters and things that we need to implement to make sure that there's like fireproofing and certain things because you have giant warehouses full of highly flammable alcohol.
alcohol
So there's a lot
vapors.
of
Yeah,
different components. Yeah, a lot of things that we have to work on, but it gives us that again that basis and that starting point and like it's been fantastic and like it lets us know that in the future if somebody comes to us and they're like one of our partners at the Bardstown Bourbon Company has a glass rickhouse. So like the entire facade of the rickhouse is completely all glass on one side.
oh wow,
And so they want to measure the impact of like temperature, humidity at that side of the rickhouse versus all of the other rickhouses that are, sided like either steel or whatever it is.
hmm.
And we might also go and throw, we could throw a sunlight thing over there to see how much actual sunlight that it's getting exposure to or which of the floors. So there's so many different areas that we can continue to scale this up from using the different hardware that we're able to just pull from through the Helium network.
Yeah, and I'm so glad you mentioned that this discovery process that you went through because you started with this temperature and humidity sensor, sort of got your feet wet there. And I think it's worth noting those temperature humidity sensors. I think Carrie back in the day just sent me a picture. She had this like pile of sensors on her desk. She just went online and bought everything. Um, and those are off the shelf. They're like ready to go. I usually have one on my desk, but like you can buy one, you can onboard it, and it's going to work. And I think the mental model that I like, and I'm sort of stealing this from a YouTuber AVE, it's it's Lego, right? You take these things and you sort of glue them together, and that glue now can be Claude Code or Chat GPT or whatever. Like you don't have to sort of go particularly deep on the details there. There's good reference, there's knowledge out there to make these things work, and you can basically find the challenge, right? Like you have gone deep on rick houses and you're sort of understanding that ecosystem and solving those problems. And then it's a matter of sort of matchmaking amongst all of those things. So I've been fascinated following your story. I'm really excited for this new device that you guys are sort of in the qualification stages of. I know somebody pinged me before this call that I think is working on that product with you guys. So he's excited to watch this as well. So hopefully we'll have some cool announcements around that and show that off a little bit more.
Yeah, we've
So yeah, I
got
think we have to
oh yes,
wrap
yes, we're
up a
killing
little
time.
bit. Yeah.
I was just gonna say we've got some
Yeah.
awesome partners. We're not doing it all in-house, and like I just want to wait for. I don't want to reveal too much, so we can wait for the announcements. So I'm not omitting them. I'm simply saying wait. There's some very cool news coming soon.
Yeah, I think they expected that too. So, but yeah, we're gonna definitely have a sort of a revisit of this once this stuff launches. Um, so yeah, this is I think been a fun. I think this is actually a really interesting picture of the sort of 6 years of Helium, right? Like these things take time to understand. They take time to build. You guys are at a point now where you are going to hit massive scale as you start rolling this out across all of these different companies that are handling these solutions. So my call to action here is people should go check out Baxus.co. You can buy whiskey directly. Are you guys doing wines also, or is it really just focused on whiskey these days?
No, no. I always say whiskey because that's like where I kind of got my start and it's the easiest. But we have some really big collectors for wine and champagne that have been onboarded recently. So you're
Awesome.
going to start seeing there's already listed on the marketplace wine. There's some Madeiras from the 17 and 1800s. There's like crazy stuff. Like I get so excited just like going through there. Some like chartreuse from the early 1900s. So
Wow.
there's
I'll
wine
have to do
too.
a little
Definitely
browsing.
wine for those who enjoy.
I'm on the $2 Chuck budget, but I will have fun looking through it. As I mentioned earlier in the call, your handle is Web40, the letter O, not zero. It's a different guy. The social handle for Baxus, folks should follow that on Twitter. That's at BaxusCo. Zvi, thank you so much for kicking off 2026 with us. This has been awesome. And folks should give you a follow and follow up with some more questions. And we'll come back to these sensor solutions once those ship.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Joey. This was a blast.
Yeah.